Welcome back, America. Senator Tom Cotton joins me, the senator from Arkansas. Good morning, Senator Cotton. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you.
I got to cover a lot of stuff with you, but I got to start with the TikTok bill. It's not before you yet. It will be voted on the House tomorrow. I expect it to pass overwhelmingly. When it gets to the Senate, will Senator Tom Cotton support banning or forcing the sale of TikTok from the Chi-Coms?
Yes, Hugh, of course. There's a lot of different bills to regulate TikTok in this country. But clearly, what Congressman Gallagher and his counterparts in the House have done has gotten the widest consensus, and it gets the job done. It's not a ban of TikTok per se. It simply insists that ByteDance, which is a Chinese company that is wholly controlled and influenced by the Chinese Communist Party, must divest TikTok. And it gives them 5 or 6 months to do so. And I'm confident there are many American companies and wealthy investors who would line up for the opportunity to buy TikTok to make sure it's owned by Americans who are not going to exploit your data for their own purposes or turn it into a propaganda tool of Chinese communism. And Hugh, I think last week when this bill passed committee by a vote of 50-0, which is pretty remarkable, we got a small glimpse and foretaste of what Chinese communists could do with TikTok. TikTok sent push notifications to its users' phones, urging them to call Congress to oppose this bill. Well, Hugh, what do we think TikTok would do if, say, President Trump next year wanted to impose new tariffs on China that would be crippling to the Chinese economy, or at a moment of heightened tensions and potential conflict around Taiwan? This is the exact kind of propaganda risk that I and others have warned about with TikTok for years. So I expect a very large vote in the House tomorrow, and I would urge Chuck Schumer to promptly bring that bill to the floor and pass it so we can get on with the process of forcing a Chinese communist-dominated company to divest from TikTok.
If Senator Schumer were not in any way compromised by TikTok money or by colleagues in his conference who are compromised by TikTok money, how quickly could the House bill get to a vote on the floor of the Senate?
Well, Hugh, I suspect that we'd have to go the long way, or the hard way, as we sometimes call it, because we have a few senators who are dug in, and they would drag down all the procedures they could. But again, Hugh, the stakes are so high that it's worth taking that time. In short, basically, it would require Senator Schumer probably to file a motion one Tuesday, have a first vote on a Thursday, and then come back the next week, and you'd look at passing that on, say, like Tuesday or Wednesday. And you could do stuff, obviously, in the meantime on the Senate floor. In addition to that legislation. But that's what we call the long way or the hard way. It typically takes about 4 Senate business days. Again, you can do other things. Even if you couldn't, though, it's essential that we take action to get this propaganda tool out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, people should call Senator Schumer and be very polite, 202-224-3121, and urge him to please bring this. This is an important national security issue. It's about my grandchildren. It's about Senator Cotton's kids. I do not want them growing up in a world addicted to the TikTok run by the Chi-Coms. It's just I can't even believe we haven't done this.
And, well, I mean, TikTok has an army of lobbyists and lawyers that are trying to muddy the waters or, again, using push notifications to urge its users to call Congress and oppose the legislation, which I have to say is one of the worst own goals I've seen in advocacy work in my 10 years in the Congress, because, again, all it did was highlight the potential for TikTok to be manipulated by Chinese communists. But, you know, Hugh, it's not just a threat to the United States directly and to our rivalry with China. You saw also last fall what it meant for anti-Semitism in this country.
Yes.
TikTok continued to promote the most vile kinds of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, to blame Israel for the most vicious attack on Jews since the Holocaust. I suspect Chuck Schumer is personally aggrieved by what TikTok did last fall with Israel. I also suspect he has a lot of voters and supporters in New York State who would be urging him to bring this bill promptly to the floor, because we don't want to continue to let Chinese communists infiltrate our country with anti-Semitic filth that is designed to divide and inflame American opinion.
This is really such an easy vote, and it should move through, and it should happen. Now, Senator, I want to go back 5 days to the State of the Union. I did not see you in any of the panning shots. Were you in the chamber?
I was, Hugh. I was there. I said to a colleague next to me as soon as Joe Biden started, one, why is he yelling? And two, why is he talking so fast? I think it's clear that President Biden thought that he needed to go in and be super amped up to dispute all the very valid concerns about his age and infirmity. I also think that, the Democratic Party had kind of put on its game plan to turn it into a campaign rally. I've never seen one side chanting 4 more years or cheering for the most mundane lines. That probably the White House told the House Democrats that the president needs the room to be full of energy to make it through the night. But beyond those oddities of the delivery, Hugh, what you just saw is more of the old school ideological liberalism that is really what's causing Joe Biden's poll numbers to tank. Sure, people know that he's old and infirm, but what they really dislike is the liberal policies that have made their lives so much harder, made the standards of living lower. They've brought more crime into this country, opened our borders, made American disrespect in the world. And you just heard more of that at the State of the Union, in addition to a lot of blame shifting for his own problems. This
morning in news items from John Ellis, I found this extraordinary bit. The 7 swing states most likely to decide the 2024 presidential election are facing more economic misery than the rest of the U.S., adding an obstacle to President Joe Biden's reelection campaign. The Bloomberg Economic Misery 2 Index, an analysis of cumulative inflation rates over 4 years, plus the latest unemployment rate, illustrates how differing economic conditions across the United States can impact the electoral vote. The index is higher in the battleground states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin than in those that reliably vote either Republican or Democrat in presidential election. Maybe that's why he was yelling so much, Senator, but I said on air, and I'll say it again, I've watched between 40 and 50 of these. That's the only time I've ever been disturbed. I've been inspired. I've been disappointed. I have been alarmed at the ability of the Bill Clinton people to deliver a speech like that. I've never been disturbed. I don't think President Biden is up to this job for 4 more years. I don't think he's up to it right now. Do you think other people on the other, in your colleagues in the Senate, did they feel sorry for him? Because he really was just shouting.
I can't speak for the Democrats, but I would say that most Republicans feel sorry for the American people, having lived through 3 years of Joe Biden's presidency with another 9 months ahead of us. Because, again, it's not just his age and infirmity, it's the failures of his liberal policies that have caused him to be so unpopular. And I know all the talking heads on CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times were celebrating the fiery Joe Biden out of that speech the other night. Again, I think they got their talking points from the White House to try to allay the ongoing concerns about Joe Biden's ability to campaign and certainly to govern for 4 more years. Well, as you've seen from the polling since the speech Thursday night, it was one of the most poorly received State of the Unions ever.
Yeah, and he's relapsed into terrible campaigning mode, as we saw yesterday in New Hampshire.
Well, yeah, he in an impromptu moment, he acknowledged that Laken Riley's killer was an illegal, even though he referred to her as Lincoln Riley, the USC football coach. And then the next day at Air Force One, he was challenged on that because you had a bunch of lefties, of all things, offended that he had described the murderer as illegal. And the next day he said, well, technically he's not supposed to be here. And then the next day after that, after what I assume was a 5-alarm fire in the White House and all the progressive young staffers with their hair on fire about it, he had to go have a sit-down interview with MSNBC to officially apologize to a heinous, brutal murderer for calling him an illegal. If there was ever a moment to show how Joe Biden is dragged around by the nose by the progressive left, that's the moment. When he apologized to an illegal for calling him illegal, even though he's a brutal murderer, versus Donald Trump meeting with that victim's family and promising to get them justice.
Now, Senator, I want to do some breaking news with you. Headline at the Wall Street Journal. Consumer prices rose 3.2% from a year earlier in February. That is much stronger than was expected. We are not beating inflation.
No, we're not, Hugh. There's a time when the Democrats would say, well, if you squint really hard and you look from a certain angle and you exclude food and fuel because they're volatile and decide who needs to eat or go anywhere, inflation is getting under control. Well, now you have those headline numbers, and I haven't seen the exact reports, but for months, so-called core inflation has been even higher.
Yeah, it's 3.8%. Core inflation is 3.8%.
And the reason you do that is, granted, food and gas in particular can be more volatile, but other prices tend to show you whether or not inflation has sunk deep into the economy, and it has. If it is at 3.8%, as you say, Hugh, that's almost double what the Federal Reserve's target rate is. Yet you have all these Democrats still demanding that interest rates come down, not because they think inflation is beaten, but because they want it to help Joe Biden's election. It just goes to show how badly Joe Biden's policies have failed the American people, that in year 4, after they unleashed inflation with their spending binge in year 1, you still have an inflation that is almost double the Federal Reserve's target rate.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining me this morning. Good luck on